Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Inside DevOps. I'm your host, John Bristowe, and we are very lucky and fortunate to be having Damian Brady joining us from GitHub. He's the Senior Manager for Developer Advocacy at GitHub and is a huge advocate for all things that are DevOps and DevOps-oriented. He's formerly a cloud advocate at Microsoft. He was there for 4 years, and prior to that, he was a dev at Octopus Deploy, so some common ground. He has a 20-year background in software development and consulting in a broad range of industry. Regular speaks at conferences, user groups, and other events around the world. Trying not to brag too much there, Damo. Most of the time, you'll find him talking to developers, IT pros, data scientists about a whole range of topics, including DevOps, MLOps, etc. strategies. You can check him out on Twitter at Damo Visa. I guess that's the best way to pronounce that. But thanks for joining me on the podcast. Okay, there you go. So thank you for joining me on the podcast. I really appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, of course. No problem. Good to be here.
Yeah, so you've been at GitHub for a bit, not to brag a little bit, but I mean, for those folks who haven't, who haven't visited the site, I mean, obviously GitHub is it's a lot of things to a lot of different people, and it is basically ruling the world right now. So I mean, how are things at GitHub these days? You guys must be pretty happy with all the progress you've made with helping developers be awesome.
Yeah, I know when I joined, it felt like things were going a million miles an hour, but more and more features getting released, and you saw the stat, like the 100 million developers. Just using GitHub now, which is a pretty big number.
Congratulations!
Yeah, a little bit hard to fathom. Yeah, thanks. I had nothing to do that.
That's unbelievable. It's gotten so bad now. So GitHub is so pervasive. It's so prevalent now in today's society that sometimes when I see a kitchen tile and I see it's got like white and green in it, I'm like, that's my contribution. Like there's I got to get my stats up, sort of thing. So, but yeah, just incredible growth.
Yeah, the social media team actually is on the lookout for those. You'll see if you follow GitHub on Instagram, if anybody does, you'll see them pop up every now and then. People just taking photos of something that looks like a contribution graph. Yeah, I'm on the lookout for it everywhere.
So when actually, I'm happy to say, I think I mentioned this in a different podcast, that last year, and it's just growing. Like not only the number of developers, but like even the amount of activity. Like last year was my largest number of contributions ever, and I've been on GitHub since I think 2007 is when I joined. 2008. Incidentally, I mean, GitHub's been around for a little bit. I mean, GitHub it was founded. It was 1 week ago today. 15 years. Sorry, 15 years ago. 1 week earlier today was when it was first founded. So February 8th, 2008 was its birthday. Wow. So congratulations, happy birthday! 15 years. Founded under the term Logical Awesome LLC. So some interesting stats there. But like, when did you join GitHub? Like, when did you create an account and start, messing around with repos and all that?
Honestly, it probably would have been around the time I was at Octopus.
Okay.
Prior to that, I was kind of big into what was TFS at the time, Team Foundation Server.
Nice.
So I kind of I got into Git a little bit, but not a lot. Yeah. Like that was the Team Foundation version control stuff,
Yeah.
Check out a file and then check them in before you go home so other people can do work, kind of workflow. It was actually I was going to say it was actually at Octopus where they started using Git, and it was kind of my first time using Git in anger. And I made the decision, I remember this, I made the decision to drop back to the command line to use for all of my Git commands, just so I could try and understand what was going on. I think it helped.
Yeah.
But
I don't think that's a unique story. A lot of people I think a lot of us were stuck on SourceSafe or Subversion or various other source control repository. We're like, this is nuts. There's got to be something better than this.
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Awesome.
So about that.
Sorry, I keep jumping over you. Sorry, apologies. So for those folks who are looking at Damo's face and say, that guy looks familiar, you may have seen him at this event that you guys ran recently called GitHub Universe. This was over in the States. This was a pretty successful event. We were there as a sponsor at Octopus Deploy. How was this event for you? Was this your first official GitHub as an advocate on stage, et cetera, et cetera?
My first in-person one. So I was around at GitHub for the previous year, but the Universe the year before was all remote. So pre-recorded keynote, a lot of pre-recorded sessions, and I ran a workshop, like a Codespaces workshop, while I was doing that.
Right.
That year, but yeah, this one was first one back in person, and yeah, it's a big production. Yeah, I know your team was there. I came and had a look at the demo session as well, and had a chat to a couple of people. What you mentioned that I was at Octopus, I was there when there were about 15 people, and I think what Octopus is a little bit larger than that now.
A little bit, so, yeah. Try not to. Again, we're not comparing stats here because you guys are far bigger than we are.
but yes, but
so what was the general vibe at Universe for you? Like, were you like, it obviously was great to be in-person event again. Obviously, that's understated, but you know, the vibe there amongst developers, like, you guys have so much momentum right now, like 100 million developers, GitHub Universe. It must have been like, wow, it's like you guys are kicking goals, as we like to say in Australia.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there were a bunch of things that were announced in the keynote. There were two sessions that we got a really good reaction from the community. One was the Octoverse. So there's the state of the Octoverse, which
yes.
Yeah, this thing we do every year where we get a bunch of stats and have a look at, you know, growth of different languages and stuff like that, and compare them. There's some great stats from that. I think we grew in every country or every continent, I think, except for Antarctica. And we, yeah, I know. And we drilled into that. And the reason
who's the country manager for Antarctica?
I know.
He or she must have been really disappointed.
Very, very disappointed. I was amazed that we could actually tell that even. But there was something like maybe 11, somewhere in the teens kind of number of developers in Antarctica, because they were running a study on like krill in the Antarctic Ocean, and then that boat with all the researchers had come back. And so there are only 3 of them now, but everywhere else it grew. But that Octoverse was really interesting for kind of what people are writing and how. And I know HCL was one of the languages, I guess, that kind of grew a great deal. There you go.
We'll come back to that in a second. But you said there was 2 things you saw at Octopus. What was the second thing?
Yeah, sorry. So the other one was the GitHub Next team. So while you're browsing, if you go to githubnext.com, that's a whole bunch of stuff that is kind of part of our research and development department, and that's where Copilot started. So there's a whole lot of stuff in there around Copilot. So those top 2, code brushes and Hey GitHub, Copilot CLI, and a bunch of other stuff around AI. But some of the things that Kyle Dagger showed in that session about just things we're trying, things we think are going to improve people's lives, that one got a lot of positive feedback too.
I stumbled across this, and I thought I had found like some magical mystery area of the internet, and I was like, I don't think I should be seeing this. I was like, I stumbled across this early on, and I was like, this is amazing. Like, I get to see what's happening and stuff. And the same thing goes when I found the GitHub roadmap. Like, I'm so stupid. I didn't realize it was public, but I was like, this is amazing. I can see 6 months into the roadmap future. I'm like, no, this is all public. It's meant to be shared, you know? So, the GitHub Next site is great. It definitely gives you some sense of what's happening there.
Yeah, definitely. And if you're using Copilot, you can see like a couple of these have changed to a usable prototype. And that means they're in the GitHub Copilot labs. So you can install them now. One of the ones which is really cool is the TestPilot, I think it is, which will generate unit tests to cover code that you've written.
I like that.
And try to hit like the edge cases and things like that as well. It's obviously not perfect. Really, you should write your own tests, but it's an interesting thing to have.
Hey, I'll find any way to get my code coverage up to 100% and brag about it.
Yeah, exactly. Just don't write any assertions and it's fine.
No, that's right. Just don't touch it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I wanted to jump back to the Octoverse because I cite this all the time, and it's amazing to me how many podcasts I jump on and I tell people, I say, do you guys know what is the fastest growing programming language on GitHub? And everyone's like, got to be JavaScript, or it's got to be C++ or something. And I'm like, no, it's HCL. And they're like, HC what? And I'm like, HCL. It's the language it's the HashiCorp configuration language. This is the thing that basically Terraform popularized. But what this tells me is that a lot of people are doing config as code. that a lot, or infrastructure as code rather, that a lot of people are checking in their state and, well, their configuration state, desired state basically, into GitHub. They're running this against the CLI. I'll let you tell the story, but like I know this story well, but because I've done a lot of this work. But
yeah,
did you guys find this surprising? Were you surprised by this this finding?
A little bit. I mean, when it came across, I was like, that's interesting. I think at the time the Octoverse stats came out, the team was kind of trying to work out, what they meant and what that told us about the community as well. My boss, Martin Woodward, was away at the time, and so it came to me where somebody was like, why is HCL growing? And I think YAML's in there as well, and like as a relatively fast growing one. I was like, oh wow, that's fascinating. Well, it's probably infrastructure as code, ISE, yeah. And so it was surprising, but in hindsight, like not terribly,
It's also easy to grow from nothing in some cases, right? I'm not implying that HCL or Rust is in that camp, but certainly Rust does not surprise me. The amount of articles, the amount of news articles, the amount of blog posts, the amount of traction I see around Rust is just bonkers right now. Everyone loves Rust. But HCL was definitely like, whoa, I was like, that's like crazy. I was like, that's awesome, because people are basically utilizing infrastructure as code, which is great. But it came out of nowhere. I was like, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, exactly. And you look at, I saw some of this raw data. I don't have it on hand and can't really remember it exactly. But you look at like HCL, the growth is massive. But you look at the number of projects that are using HCL versus the number that are using JavaScript, and obviously they're very skewed. But the trajectory is massive. Like, really telling.
I love this report. I've been a fan of both this and the Stack Overflow survey for years, I think, and State of JavaScript and State of CSS and all these state of reports. I think they're fantastic because they really provide a great sort of context of where people are at. And I think, it's great that you guys have been doing this for the past 10 years. And I would say just continue, and it will just, here's to the next 100 million, I guess. And so, it's kind of hard to compare to this as like, I kind of feel like it's like 100 million. That's insane. Like I didn't realize there was 100 million developers on the planet. Like it's bonkers.
It's such a abstract number. Like what is that? It's 100 million people. That's 5 times the population of Australia. I think was it since the previous year? Essentially, the entire population of Australia have joined GitHub, basically in the previous year from that one. So
unreal.
Yeah, but it's not a real number, right? It's just a big thing that I just can't fathom that many people. Right?
Yeah. Anyways, moving on. I thought I'd just mention so. Anyways, it was like one of those things. Like I was kind of like pat yourself on the back and everything. So there you go. I'll pump your tires and here we go. Yeah. So this was an article that I caught that I want to discuss with you briefly, and this is something that I know that you're heavily involved in GitHub Actions. We'll talk about GitHub Actions a little bit, but this was a great example of, hey, you can use GitHub Actions more than just builds, right? And so what this is a blog post that I came across from the Docs team. I love the Docs repo because it shows what's possible with not only GitHub Actions, but also with deployment environments. So they utilize deployment environment. They got like 300 deployment environments going at any single time. Basically, they deploy all the time, which is awesome. But in this blog post, they talk about how they structure their repo, how they, establish labels, how they establish their projects. And then the thing is, the workhorse of everything is basically, like they say here, peanut butter and jelly, the combination of projects plus GitHub Actions. So they have basically event handlers for all kinds of operations that occur against projects, like a new issue is created, or a new item is tagged, or whatever it is. They've got an action that kicks off, fires off, automates everything. And anyways, I'll let you speak to this. I mean, you obviously know this story as well as I do, but I think it was fantastic.
We tend to use issues. This is actually one of the things that took me a little bit of getting used to when I first started at GitHub, is we use issues and projects for everything we do internally. So in DevRel, like we have a couple of DevRel orgs. We have DevRel repos. We have a /GitHub/DevRel repo, and we have an IRL repo, and the IRL one is all of our events, like in real life events. That repo, we have some form templates, so some issue forms, which means people will come and ask for us to attend an event, or for DevRel to sponsor an event or something like that. We have actions that run when those events are created or when those issues are created, and they will parse the contents of that issue and pull out important stuff like, hey, we need a speaker for this, and it'll label it with that label. So we have a bunch of automation that just runs on these things, and it helps us kind of categorize and do all that kind of stuff. So we manage all of our work with projects and with issues. And pretty much every team inside GitHub does a similar thing. Like, this is how we manage not just the code, but the work we do too.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah. Some of those repos, like the DevRel one, doesn't have a great deal of code in it. The IRL one has almost no code. Basically, the only code is the actions themselves and a couple of like playbooks and readmes. So the projects stuff we use kind of independently of a code base, which we do in a bunch of places. Yeah.
So what we're talking about, obviously, is actions, which are basically the workhorse of GitHub. They are a way you can describe a workflow to basically perform work, and they do everything and anything you could possibly want relative to GitHub. I mean, I've seen people do some crazy thing with actions, and the nice thing about actions, obviously, is the fact that you can write them very easily using YAML. So you construct these workflows. YAML seems like a natural choice. I mean, there are other options out there, but YAML seems like pretty much the de facto specification these days for describing a workflow. And so you define these workflows, and then they kick off based off a variety of events. You can see them listed here. I cite this page every time I talk to people about actions, because I talk about actions quite a bit. And the one that most people typically cite is the build, test, publish sort of workflow. But what you've been obviously working with actions and telling people about actions forever. I mean, are people using it beyond this sort of workflow? Are you seeing some edge cases that I maybe never heard of, or like, is this the canonical sort of way that people are using actions these days?
Yeah, I mean, the build, like the CI stuff is pretty much how people use it most of the time. But I've seen it used for things like issues, especially for issues when people raise new issues, to notify the right people, depending on, you might choose what part of the application in your issue form, and then it will just notify that person. So issues is the other bit that people use it for. Pull requests is the other big one as well. So having workflows that will run when a pull request is created to run all of your tests and things like that, so you can catch any of those issues before it gets merged back into your main branch. That's part of the CI kind of process, I guess. What are some other ones I've seen? I've seen a lot of people use the repository dispatch and workflow dispatch events, which are kind of like manual triggers. So you can click a button to say, okay, kick off this build or kick off this workflow. But then the API driven one as well, where you can just hit an endpoint and pass it some content, and it'll kick off a run as well, which is good for kind of integrating with third-party systems that don't have that native integration.
Right. The thing I loved about actions and the way you guys have approached a lot of this stuff is that everything is almost addressable via webhook. I mean, if it's an event or otherwise, you can actually remotely kick off those workflows via the dispatch on an API if you wanted to. I mean, I don't know everyone who does that, but it's just like, it's awesome that you can do all this stuff. And the fact that you guys provide free minutes for public repos is also awesome. Like, I mean, it kind of explains what we were saying earlier about 100 million developers. You can kind of understand why. I mean, like, you guys are providing free workloads, basically.
Yeah. And it's a tricky thing to provide sometimes. I mean, we've, just like everybody, offering kind of free compute, basically. We have issues sometimes with people using that free compute to do things they're not supposed to do.
Yes.
Yeah,
right.
and we've made the problem worse as well by giving people free Codespaces, which is the same kind of issue. It's just compute in the cloud that we give you for free. That aside, though, I mean, I don't know the stats off the top of my head, but I know a lot of people use the free minutes and not anything else. Like, you can get a reasonable amount of work done with projects without touching your credit card, basically.
Yep. One thing I did want to touch on is the fact that the marketplace is awesome because it's really a place where you can go to find third-party actions, and also actions published by GitHub. Let's be fair. All the actions that are basically there, you have at your disposal. I remember when this number said like 400. So there are currently 17,000 actions in your marketplace, which is bananas. And now that it launched in 2019. In the 3 years you guys have been live, this thing has grown like it's almost as impressive as the 100 million number. This is incredible. Like, did you guys anticipate this? Was this your intent from the beginning? Like, tell me a little bit. Like, are you guys impressed by this number? Or are you like, no, we gotta have 30,000 or whatnot? Like,
I mean, I'm impressed. At some point, there's got to be a lot of those kind of 17,000 that don't get used very much. But it's one of the advantages of it is it's really easy to kind of put together an action, relatively easy, I guess, to put together an action and make it available so other people can use it. The big thing that 17,000 number gives me is the fact that I probably don't have to write my own script to do stuff. And I don't mind writing Bash and PowerShell and things like that. But if there's something that somebody else has written that already does that work, I'm just going to use their thing. The other great thing about this is everything in that marketplace has to live in an open source repo. So you drill into any of these actions and you can see exactly the code that it's running, which is pretty useful. It means, especially if there's something that almost does what you want, you can just fork that repo and create your own action that does the exact thing that you want, I suppose. So I love the fact that number is really high, just because you search for something and you find it. I saw you searching for Octopus before, and I remember there being 2 or 3 of those that basically just called out to the CLI. But I think there you go. There's quite a few now.
We've got 10 now. So
nice.
These other ones were created by the community, but these ones that have the official logo and with this verified by GitHub logo, these are ours. So we have 10 now in the marketplace.
And I was going to point that out as well. Like with 17,000 actions, which ones are any good? We obviously don't go through all of those 17,000 actions. Like we don't have the capacity to check all of those, are amazing and all that kind of stuff. But we do have like teams that we trust or third parties that we trust. And that's what that little tick is. We know that that's written by, a company who, I guess, is invested to make sure that this action works really well. And we know that they're going to deliver something good. So that's one thing to look at when you're looking for which ones are the best ones, I guess.
Yep. Fantastic. Yeah, just impressive, like super impressive. And I mean, again, it's a credit, I think, to GitHub providing such a great way to build these things. I mean, it speaks to what's available through the actions org. I was going to talk a little bit about runner images, but if you go to /actions, I mean, all the building blocks are there. You can build actions in JavaScript and TypeScript. I've seen people build them in Go and in C#. Part of this also speaks to the fact that when you take a look at the runner images, which are basically those are the things that are going to run your actions, they actually come pre-installed with a whole lot of stuff that you can use. Like if you take a look at what's in there, this is pretty impressive. Like there's a lot of tools available in the runners for actions to use. Like you can utilize Go, you can utilize Bash, you can utilize Helm, there's Homebrew. Like these give great options. And speaking as a person who's actually personally written a number of actions and thought a little bit about, okay, how do I kick things off? How do I bootstrap my action? Having something like Homebrew is awesome because it's like, well, we'll just download the package through Homebrew, install it, and away we go. And then suddenly it's like an easy conversation from there on in. I don't have to build all the building blocks because they're already in the runner images.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. I remember the first time I came across this, I was pretty amazed by how much stuff was already in there. I mean, I suppose it's much easier for us to create these images, have them running there in standby, and then when you need a hosted agent or hosted runner, we just expose that to you as well. So the startup time for these is not huge.
No.
And you don't need to install all this stuff as like the first thing you do on that runner. That said, if you do need stuff that's not in here, one option, like you can always install it, but one option is to have your self-hosted runners. So you can run them in your own infra as well, if you need to.
Yep. I know a lot of folks who utilize their own hosted runners and it works great for them. And then they can, and this is a model that's provisioned not only by GitHub, but other CI vendors that I've seen, where you can establish, they have like a hybrid model where maybe they don't want their runners to run beyond the firewall. They want to host all that code and they want to run those runners behind the firewall. That gives you that option, basically.
Yeah, definitely.
Another thing that I loved about the Actions org is they have these starter workflows, which is basically when you kick off a new workflow. So if you say new YAML file, whatever, and you're doing it inside the browser, that is within the GitHub portal, whatever you want to call it, there's this option that will show based on a variety of criteria, like, hey, these are some starter templates that you can get going. I thought this was a great idea, and they classified them based on the sort of thing that you want to get started with. So if you're interested in getting started with CI, for example, they have all these starter templates that you can kick off of. So let's say, for example, I'm a C++ guy. I'm going to be using CMake, for example. This is a starter template. This will stub this out basically as part of my workflow. So it's a nice little bootstrapper for anyone who's like, I don't know anything about Actions. I don't know anything about YAML. I mean, YAML looks as bad as it sounds, sort of thing. Like, so this gets you going, which I think was another nice touch.
Yeah, they worked pretty hard on that, kind of getting started. Because as soon as you hand somebody an empty file and say, okay, go write YAML.
Yeah, I know.
It's where do you even start? So like, I think it has a look at your code base. It has a look at dependencies that you have and suggests suggest a starter template. And you can still write from scratch. That's fine. But I never do anymore. Like I used to, because I had to, but I don't do it anymore.
Yeah, same. I'm with you. I think that blinking cursor is like, it's almost like taunting you. It's like, all right, what do you got, buddy? You got nothing. You got nothing. You don't know anything. Like it's like the imposter syndrome just mounts. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
So if you're up, go ahead.
I was just going to say, there's even like, do you need a curly brace? Think about whether you need a curly brace to start off with. Am I an array? Am I going to start?
You don't know what you're doing. Yeah, that's right.
That's right. Yeah.
So in here, you'll find the source code for a variety of actions, including the setup actions. So these are the ones that will set up environments, for example. Like, let's say, for example, you're kicking off CI for a Go application or a Python application. This is what these actions are. There's other things in here as well. There's the toolkit, which is the basis of how you build actions. So this is a JavaScript framework that basically gives you all the plumbing that you could ever want to do caching or to do globbing or HP requests or other types of operations, like getting inputs. Like that's as much as YAML likes to tout itself as being kind of simple, getting inputs is pretty hard because they support a very small set of types, and like everything's like a string or an array, and that's about it. And it's like, so you have this package for IO, which allows you to do input, output, etc., as well as for files and things like that. So these are the building blocks. If you're ever interested in building an action, you can use this library for doing that.
There's also, I might mention as well, if you did want to try it out, GitHub Skills, which is relatively new. So it's skills.github.com. There's a bunch of like kind of getting started things. One of them is an example of like writing your own JavaScript action. So if you scroll down a little bit, it's kind of towards the bottom of the automating workflows. So yeah, JavaScript actions will essentially walk you through how to write your own action, basically.
And so, it's a template.
It's a template. Yeah, I think all of these skills are just templates. So you create the template, you have the repo, and you're doing all that stuff yourself. We're growing the number of things in those skills, but they're pretty basic. Here's how you get started doing stuff at the moment. So if you
I
did
hadn't
want to
seen
write
this before. This is awesome. Yeah,
I got a couple in the back of my mind for other things that we want to put in there. But of course, I'm node sniping myself into, okay, how do we do a Codespaces one without making it too complicated? Yeah,
I know. I love the form that you guys are taking with this. So like the templates, the ability to spit these things out. Like if you're at all wanting to get started with TypeScript actions, for example, like that are actions that are based on TypeScript, obviously it gets transpiled down to JavaScript because that's what's required. But this is a good starting reference. I mean, if you take a look at the package.json file, it's got all the basic setup scripts basically for you to get started, utilizing NCC, utilizing NPM, utilizing the ESLint, prettier for code. We got to have all the things, right? We got to have TSC. So it gives you everything basically that you need to get started, which is fantastic. And then away you go. And then you can just basically say, say, yeah, I want to use this template. Away we go, and it spits it all out for you, which is fantastic. So awesome stuff. Like I'm really impressed with all the plumbing that's available around actions, and it's not surprising when you take a look at the marketplace why there's 17,000. You know, like when you have all the tooling available and it's this easy to write them, it's no surprise that people will go ahead and write them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it means that somebody's probably written the thing that you wanted to write yourself. You don't have to.
Pretty much. I mean, like, speaking a little bit about actions, I mean, you guys aren't stopping, right? Like, you're not resting on your laurels. This was something that dropped back in May of last year that I immediately pointed to. I'm like, we're going to do that for our actions. So this is a feature called job summaries. And this is really nice because typically when you run actions, you'll get this little display of text. So you get this big giant wall of text when they execute. And what you would really like to do sometimes is actually have some nice output. And so job summaries are a way in which you can actually, through Markdown, GitHub flavored Markdown, emit all kinds of really cool things. And I thought, you know, I've always said a picture's worth 1,000 words and a demo's worth 1,000 pictures. And you take a look at like some of the things that people are generating with this are fantastic. So you've got like inline tables, you've got links with emojis, you've got, you know, statuses, you've got things, and you can go so crazily as using Mermaid. I mean, it's just bonkers, right? So, but it's fantastic, right? Like, the
Mermaid awesome stuff could be pretty interesting for the summaries or work. What's that? Actions, job summaries. Because I mean, there is the little diagram of, hey, we went to these environments and so on. But if you're thinking about a third-party, you know, application that also has its own kind of diagram of what's going on, you're generating those and having them right there with the actions is kind of cool. There's also, I'm not sure how accurate it is, how useful it'll be, but mathematical, like you can write maths formulas now in
I love it.
What the name is, but yeah, kind of cool.
Yeah, I remember seeing the blog post around, like, if I take a look at the spec, which is here, I mean, we're going totally off the farm here, but if you take a look at the spec, I mean, this is obviously GitHub flavored Markdown, which is, this is predating actually that work there, so I'd have to find it somewhere else, but there's all kinds of things that you can do, and there's all these extensions that you guys have added, and I honestly didn't expect Mermaid to get integrated as quickly as it did. Like, Mermaid.js has been under development for a few years, but then you guys, I mean, GitHub just decided, let's go ahead and try it. Let's put it in there. We're like, this is awesome because we've used it on some of our internal documents. We've generated, and it's easy to update. Like, you simply just make a couple of changes in the Mermaid. Well, I guess you'd call it Markdown. I don't know what you call it, but it's a formatting structure. And then you just commit changes. You don't have to redraw anything. You don't have to fire up Paint or anything like that. I mean, it just re-renders it. It's fantastic.
Yeah. No, pretty handy. I think that was just a case of, hey, we'd like to have this in the product, or like we'd like to enable people to do that. And there's already an open source project or already a project where somebody's done it. So build on what the community's done, which is kind of the MO, right?
That was kind of your motto from the beginning, I guess. So this is another tool that I saw come in, obviously, the importer, which is, you know, it allows you to basically, if you're looking to migrate, you can certainly do that. And out of the box, I believe we saw Jenkins as one of the demos. Is that right?
Yeah, that was one of them. I can't remember the names of them all. There's 3 or 4 of them. Jenkins is definitely one of them. Azure Pipelines as well is another one. So if you were to go from pipelines, they're basically, one of the ways that we write features inside GitHub is we roll them out gradually and with community and customer support. So we work really hard at making sure that people are actually using the product while we're developing it to make sure that it's actually doing what we need it to do, and what people actually want it for. So we were trying this GitHub Actions importer with a bunch of like larger companies with some quite complicated workflows, just to try and get it to be as good as we possibly could. And their goal, I think, when they were testing all this, was to get about 80% of workflows migrated automatically, and they hit just over 90% when we announced it at Universe. So the idea is it's not going to get absolutely everything, but they're seeing around 90% of these workflows being migrated kind of automatically. The other thing that this GitHub Actions importer does, it'll kind of give you a what if scenario as well. So you can have a look at what would happen if I wanted to migrate all my stuff. You can even look at things like, your current usage patterns of the actual, so the workflows that you use in whatever tool you're using, and it will help you help guide you with what kind of resources that you need in GitHub Actions to meet those goals as well. So kind of like there's the forecast reporting, so it'll forecast what you need to do, but also help, so if you need some larger runners, you'll know that ahead of time rather than having to scramble.
I always give me your largest runner. That's what I.
They're getting big, and you can ask, if you need really, really big ones, you can talk to us, and we've got a few up our sleeves that you can.
Oh, try. I like it. That's awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of, obviously the fact that you're specifying these things and providing tooling for migrating. So, people might wonder, like, why would I use this? Well, if you're on Azure DevOps, for example, or Jenkins, and you're inclined to migrate over to GitHub Actions, this is a tool to help you do that. I don't know if you've heard of Dagger at all, but I've been looking at this for a while, and this is from the folks over at the folks who created Docker. And the idea here is that, look, forget about importers. Make your pipeline agnostic and use a language and just run them anywhere you want. And so Dagger provides this sort of baseline. Have you taken a look at Dagger yet? Have you read about what it's providing?
I've heard of it. I haven't looked in much detail. I'm guessing, is it kind of like an abstraction layer over the top of CI?
You got it.
Cool.
Yeah, you got it. So the idea is that you can run your pipelines. So it's literally right here. It's like basically what they do is they leveraging container. I know. So obvious. But I've used this and it works really well. So the idea is that if you run your pipelines in containers, they're portable. So why not and then they can run anywhere. So you don't have to worry about converting workflows. You don't have to worry about converting your YAML, this flavor of YAML to that flavor of YAML. And then you can just basically, this is the diagram that they provide, which is, not super technical, but you get the idea. So you define your workflow. This is assuming like this is going to be in a language like Q or something else like, some other workflow definition. And then on top of that, the Dagger engine works with any Docker compatible runtime, and away you go. And then you can just run it anywhere you want. So this one is still under development. It's early days for this. They're not even at V1. But when I first heard about this back in the day, I was like, that is really interesting. That's a new approach I hadn't considered, which is basically to try and write your pipeline, write your workflow in a different way and then host it differently so that it's more portable. In addition to that, they're actually going with a code first approach. So you'll notice here that they're finding different languages for defining workflows. So people don't like YAML. So it's kind of like, hey, why not define them as code? Right. So you can define pipelines as code and away you go. And so the idea here is that you can also host it independently. So that's an interesting project, I thought. And I thought it was definitely sort of related to the importer there.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's, ultimately all you're doing is asking some kind of compute engine to run some stuff for you. So if you can abstract away what that compute engine is and the way it works, it reminds me of like, Terraform or even Dapper, which I was playing with a little bit recently, where it's just hey, here's some stuff I want to do. And I know there's a ton of things that do that. Here's the one I want to use. Go and do that. But the logic around what I want to run is, that's generic. So
Yep. I want to jump around a little bit here. I wanted to mention the GitHub CLI. I am a huge fan of your CLI. I don't know how much you use it, but I've used it a ton. And I think it's fantastic. I mean, I don't know if anyone's watching this who's been on the CLI team. Congratulations. Your CLI tool is fantastic. Part of the reason for that is because we modeled our CLI tool that we just shipped based on Go on the GitHub CLI. We liked it so much that it's kind of like, it's like, beat them or join them, basically. So we decided to join, the same idea and implement it in Go as well. So the GitHub CLI is based on Go. It's utilizes the same frameworks we were utilizing, like Cobra, etc. But what's really nice about it is that they have a set of extensions that are implemented in the CLI itself. So the CLI is super powerful, allows you to do all kinds of things like you can fork repos, you can look at your issues, you can close them, etc. You can do all kinds of things. But what's really cool is they have a whole set of extensions that integrate directly into the tool itself. And this is part of the power of utilizing a framework like Cobra, utilizing Go, and people have written a ton of extensions. The one that's probably the best cited one is this one here, GH Dash, which is a dashboard extension for your GitHub repository. So basically the dashboard is all generated in text. I'm telling you, CLIs and terminal UIs are back, baby. It's like we're having a renaissance. And all these extensions are now available. Like there's the GH screensaver, which is like a screensaver that's animating your repo.
Nice.
There's extended search. There's all kinds of extensions in your CLI. And it's fantastic. I absolutely love it. So kudos to the CLI team.
It's cool. Interestingly, the GitHub Actions importer that you were talking about just a second ago, I don't know if it's still implemented this way, but I'm pretty sure, at least when I was trying it, it was a GitHub CLI extension. So it was an extension directly off the GitHub CLI.
Here we go. So the CLI homepage is cli.github.com. And they talk a lot about the various commands that they have. Like I've looked at this page so many times because I was like, I fell in love with it immediately. And if you take a look at all the commands there, I don't see the importer listed. I didn't realize. Maybe they have it written as an extension.
Yeah, they did originally when it had a different name, which little inside baseball, I guess, was just before Universe.
Oh, my apologies. It is an extension.
Yeah.
It is an extension. There you go.
There you go.
I had no idea.
There you go. So, I mean, dog feeding, right? Or using your own tooling. So, yeah, I remember seeing that when it was really early days, I guess, before it was GitHub Actions importer. But yeah, it was a extension from the CLI.
That's fantastic. Because you guys are so big and have so many different things on the go, I'm going to jump around. Let's talk a little bit about Copilot. Sorry, I know it's like
that's
hard
good.
context switches. Copilot's going like crazy. You guys now making it available for business, which is fantastic. You guys improved you recently announced that you updated your codex, which is fantastic. This is like IntelliSense on steroids and other performance enhancing drugs, to use a bad analogy. But this has been, I've read anecdotally from folks. They're like, there was my life before Copilot, and then there was my life after Copilot, and I'm not going back. And some people like poo-poo. They're like, whatever, Copilot can't be that good. And then they get their hands on, like, wow, this is amazing. So thoughts and impressions on Copilot?
Yeah, it's another one of those ones where I thought, this is kind of cool. It's maybe a bit gimmicky until I started using it properly. And if it's not there now, I really miss it. I found myself, I know. I'm like, what do I do? There you go. It's the same problem, the blinking cursor in the empty file. Like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, it's not, it feels a little bit groundbreaking, but ultimately, for the most part, when I'm using it, it just saves me going and looking stuff up. It saves me that kind of context switch to go to Stack Overflow or to wherever and say, how does this thing work again? I can kind of just ask Copilot or even just pause my typing for a minute and it'll say, okay, I think this is where you're going to go. I found it really useful and this is very common for me, with code bases that I'm not familiar with. So if I'm picking up a brand new project, which I do all the time, or looking at somebody else's code, I'm like, okay, I need to do this. I'll start typing or add something along the lines of what's already there, and it will look at the context and say, hey, this is how it was done last time. This is how you do that. This is how you perform that function. Here's the code for you. So that's kind of cool. It's just, I mean, it's the same thing with, I was a .NET dev for a very long time. When you hit dot in Visual Studio, like giving you all of the properties and methods and things that you can call on the objects, I can't imagine trying to write like .NET code without that. And it's a little bit the same. Like I can't quite imagine, not being given the next thing that I need to do. Yeah.
This is why so many developers need multiple monitors, because you have to have the docs on one and the source code on the other.
That's right.
Now we had talked a little bit about GitHub Next, and you had mentioned the fact that the Copilot, there are various Copilot started off as a project in Next, which is awesome. I don't know if you can speak to some of the other things that are coming here, but I'd be curious. Like, we use CodeQL at Octopus for basically, I like to think of it as like a static code analysis tool for a variety of different languages. But is there anything else on this list that, aside from Copilot, I mean, the Copilot's the easy one, but was there anything else that tickled your fancy, or that you were kind of like, oh, that's interesting? Like, Copilot seems to have the lion's share of the work in progress at the moment. TestPilot you had mentioned earlier.
Yeah, it really does. That there's the TestPilot one's kind of cool, and I think a lot of these are driven out of, hey, wouldn't it be good if the Copilot stuff could tell me this? And that's it seems like an obvious thing to do next, but I mean, Copilot's already reasonably good at writing tests for you, but it doesn't understand what your edge cases are. It just says, oh, I need to exercise that function. Great, this is how you exercise that function. But working out what needs to be tested in that function is a little bit more specific, I guess, to the problem. It's a bit more of a narrow problem space. So this is an example of them trying to solve that problem. There's the brushes as well, which is kind of cool. It's almost like a stylistic refactoring, I guess.
Like prettier?
Yeah, it's a little bit more. It's a little bit prettier. Basically, you have your settings and you can say, oh, okay, let's format it like this. I think brushes is really built around. Here's how I like to, here's how I like to see this code, or here's how I like that code to work. And this is a pretty basic example, but I can't quite read the text. But yeah, that's.
Sorry.
Do you want it? That's all right. Do you want it to be done with ternaries, or do you want it to be heavily nested, or this is the way that you like to code, I guess, or this is what you like to see. So a little bit more than just kind of refactoring, more kind of stylistic refactoring, which is kind of, it's one of those things that you just kind of have to try in your real code base to see what it actually does. The other thing which I haven't actually tried in this, but apparently you can do, is you can tell the Copilot brushes, hey, this is a brush that I want to apply to other things. So I have, here's how I like to refactor this code, or here's how I like it to look. Can you just apply it to a bunch of other stuff? So yeah, it's kind of a nice, slightly smarter way of doing refactoring and changing the way it looks. Like this is a good example here of
this is a great example. I was just going to say you had me at markup, because everyone has done what I like to call the ski hill of divs. And if it can clean this up, then I think you made a huge improvement.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's another cool one. I can't remember what else is in labs, but there's a lot of work that's going on behind the scenes.
You guys talked a lot about Hey GitHub. That one was cool.
Yeah, that was a good one. Roselle on my team was the one who demonstrated that at the keynote, which was quite cool. Yeah, it's just like another thing that lets somebody who maybe can't type terribly well write at the moment to be able to use these tools as well. So obviously it's not something that I'd imagine a large number of people are going to be using at any one time, but it's certainly it's something that provides a bit of a assistance to people who need it, so they can code a bit more easily.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, all of this actually just speaks to the fact that there's a lot of exciting things happening at GitHub at the moment. And I think that, the fact that you guys are pretty transparent on this front should be commended. And just some fantastic work being done here, and it's really exciting. I think this is why you've got 100 million developers, because developers love this sort of thing. They're like, no, tell me, I don't care if it doesn't ship. I obviously want, give me everything. I want, you're going to show me the whole buffet. I want to eat everything, but I can't eat everything. But it's one of those things where it's no, I'd like to see what's out there and what you guys are thinking. And I think this is fantastic.
Yeah.
Huh. Definitely a lot to think about. So, we've got about 5 minutes left. I'm just curious if there's anything else that obviously Actions was, that's kind of like your bread and butter when you talk to customers. Is there anything else that you in particular are talking to developers a great deal about these days relative to GitHub? Fire up a repository, share your code, use Actions, use Copilot. You mentioned Codespaces. Is there anything else that you're really keen on?
Yeah, Codespaces is probably the biggest one for me. The GitHub.dev experience and Codespaces. So if you go to any repo and hit dot or hit the full stop or the period button,
Yep, I'll do this. I've done this many times. Here's our TS.
Yeah.
Here's our TypeScript client. So if I hit dot, this will kick you into the dev environment. And I've done this many times.
And this is basically just VS Code running in the browser. There's no runtime behind the scenes. You can't debug. You can't do any of that. And then Codespaces is basically like a machine in the cloud that will run VS Code for you as well. But it does have a runtime. So yeah, we announced some free minutes and things for people with for individuals as well. But what I found with that is Codespaces and the GitHub.dev experience, or the web-based editor, they were one of those things where I saw it come out and I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. It's probably a bit gimmicky. I can't imagine actually using it. And so like an anecdote, I got a new laptop because I was having trouble with the HDMI on my old one. I got it about 2 months ago. And I think it was about a week ago, I went to just open VS Code and realized I didn't have it installed because I'd just only been using GitHub.dev or Codespaces. I just hadn't installed VS Code. So I installed that, and then Git didn't work because I didn't have Git installed on my local machine, and then I didn't have Homebrew installed on that machine. So clearly, like, it's changed the way that I cut code, because I went for a solid month and a half without having the standard dev tools that I would have had already. So yeah, Codespaces, I think, has just been a much bigger game changer for people who are using it than certainly I expected.
100%.
So it's kind of,
I mean, this is what I think of as the Chromebook sort of play, right? So it's like you got a Chromebook, you got barely any disk space. Someone throws it out of a taxi cab at you, you pick it up, can you start cutting code immediately? And it's like this thing here, like the dev environment provisioning, I think is this one I hear touted all over again and again. Like, obviously, I utilize repos and I utilize Git Kraken for my Git client, and I utilize VS Code proper on my machine. But this is the one that I hear touted over and over and over again, which is basically dev environments fire up really quick. They can be shared, and away you go, and super fast and super easy, and don't have to sit around waiting for tools to download and install. I mean, let's be honest, Homebrew is pretty quick. I mean, Homebrew 4 just shipped, and they got rid of a lot of the things that made it frustrating. But I mean, being able to fire up a browser and just hit dot, I mean, like, that's pretty cool.
The other thing that it's really useful for is if you're working on a bunch of different projects, or even if you want to contribute to an open source project. Like, I remember back in the days, again, .NET Dev, I remember back in the days, you switch from one project that's using a version of .NET to a different project that's using a different version of .NET, and trying to get both of those to work beautifully on your machine at the same time, almost impossible at the time. And I'm sure that scenario has improved a bit, but things like Conda for Python, right? That was trying to get around the fact that you might have different versions of Python and different environments set up on that local machine. Codespace means you can just spin up the code space for whatever project that is, and then just stop it at the end and go and work on a completely different project that has nothing in common, and just spin that up and start using it immediately as well. So the whole, like, I need this particular setup for my machine to get going kind of disappears. GitHub, incidentally, GitHub.com, like the project that runs GitHub.com, which is actually a massive monolith, it's developed almost exclusively on Codespaces. So brand new dev can start cutting code on GitHub.com and debug it in about, I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's in the order of about 10 or 15 seconds.
Wow.
Because we've optimized ours a fair bit. And it's not a small system. It's, many gigabytes on disk, I think. I can't remember the exact number, but it's something like 20 gig on disk or 40 gig on disk or something like that.
That's right. I can do anything with a fast internet connection, I guess, is the policy there.
Yeah.
Damo, I don't want to keep you too long. I apologize for keeping you as long as I have. I do appreciate it. Folks can find you over on Twitter at DamoVista. Visa rather. If you're at all curious, go ahead and give them a follow. Is there any other resources or links that you'd like to share?
I think we're seeing GitHubNext.com. The GitHub YouTube channel is pretty good as well. I'm also I'm on Twitter. I'm also on Mastodon. DamoVisa at hachyderm.io. I think I'll probably be the only DamoVisa there anyway, for the moment. So yeah, feel free to attack me there. But yeah, the YouTube channel has a ton of stuff on there as well. So, and if you want to catch up on any of the Universe things, the Universe, GitHub Universe videos are all up there as well.
Oh, nice. Love it. That's fantastic. Well, Damo, I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much for joining me on this episode of Inside DevOps. Best of luck for getting the next 100 million developers up on GitHub. I'm sure you guys will be there really quick. And yeah, thanks again for chatting to me about GitHub, GitHub Actions, and all the nice things that you guys are doing.
Of course, no problem. Great to be here.